Hello, I'm Dr. Cynthia Cook, a Senior Fellow in the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and I'm delighted to host a public event today to talk about warfighting, readiness, and logistics. The old saying goes that amateurs study strategy and experts talk logistics, so we're here today to fill a gap in the think tank ecosystem and focus on logistics. How will warfighters get to the fight? How does the defense enterprise ensure that their equipment is ready and that they have supply chain support? We'll talk about these and other issues for the next hour, but first let me introduce my wonderful guests today and welcome them to this first iteration of our Export Talks Logistics video series. So first up on my immediate left, I have very pleased to welcome you, Mr. Patrick Kelleher, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Materiel Readiness. You serve as the principal advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment in the oversight of the department's $90 billion maintenance program. You're also responsible for the development of policies and procedures to ensure that the department meets statutory requirements to provide core depot-level maintenance support of major weapon systems, military equipment, and commodities. Prior to your current position, you were the Principal Deputy Director for Strategic Logistics at the Joint Staff J4, and you've held a lot of other leadership positions in this enterprise. You also, thank you for your service, spent 24 years in uniform as a United States Marine. I'm also pleased to welcome an excellent Air Force representative, Major General David Sanford. You are the Director of Logistics Operations J3 and the commander of the Joint Regional Combat Support for the Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA, in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. DLA Logistics Operations is responsible for the end-to-end supply chain management of DLA's 9 supply chains, providing logistics and material process management, policy, guidance, oversight, and monitoring of supply chain performance. You have spent 32 years in the United States Air Force and have held a wide variety of leadership positions, most recently as the Director of Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection for the Headquarters Air Mobility Command at Scott Air Force Base, where we first met. Thank you both for coming, and I'd like to start off by giving you an opportunity to introduce your organizations. Patrick, over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Cook, thank you. And thank you for having me here. And Dave, it's great to be on this with you. So as you mentioned, I have oversight of the department's maintenance efforts with a focus on readiness. So you can think about the title of the organization, Material Readiness, and Materiel in military terms, supplies and equipment. So we are really focused on the readiness of supplies and equipment, and I know we'll get into some discussions later about what does readiness mean. But usability, effectiveness, less so efficiency, but really primarily focused on weapons systems, mission capable rates, mission capability, really everything from aircraft carriers to machine guns, and of late we've now become recently involved in munitions readiness and the repair and maintenance of munitions, because as you know, a high profile initiative. So I'm responsible for the department's organic industrial base, which is an ecosystem of about 80 different facilities and organizations across the country. That is really the department's foundational industrial capacity. I have a portfolio really focused nominally on readiness, weapon systems readiness, but now shifting slightly to munitions, and then a focus area on data technology and innovation. And so how do we integrate data, advanced technology, accelerate the adoption of new technology for the Department of Defense sustainment enterprise? And so I'll leave it at that. But needless to say, it's an exciting portfolio. I got a great team, and we're doing some really good stuff.
Thanks. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about. Yeah. Dave.
Well, so Dr. Cook, Mr. Kelleher, thank you for the opportunity today. We're delighted to be here. Just a real quick maybe overview of Defense Logistics Agency, real quick. We're a little unique in the overall Department of Defense, and I would offer a little unique when it comes to our allies and partners too. So we manage multiple classes of supply. That's kind of how we're organized. And so those classes of supply range from providing food to the dining facilities across the globe, to your expeditionary meal, a variety of type of capability that goes with our soldiers, sailor, airmen, marines, or guardians as they go forward. Clothing, so the uniform I have on today, as well as fuel products, construction material, medical supplies, some end items, and then repair parts. And so as Mr. Kelleher is the, if you will, oversight of readiness and that depot type support, that industrial support, I am his provider. So when he talks material with an E, I'm probably the material with an A that feeds his machine and the services machine as we go forward. So we work closely with the services as well as the combatant commands. We have a global presence, global mission, which includes warehousing support as well as disposal. So as an item reaches the end of its life, we will take care of that for the services if they deem it ready for disposal. So really that end-to-end management as we go forward. And as you had mentioned, as we transition, if you will, to peer conflict or preparing for peer conflict, that is where our focus has been lately. So how do you prepare all those supply chains to be able to operate at speed and scale to support the joint force? So again, besides just the forces though, where we're one last little unique piece, we do provide whole of government support. So when you look at hurricanes Helene and Milton last year that so devastated the southeast of the United States, we were there with FEMA support, with North American Command as they provided forces to help those people that were either displaced or trapped in some of those mountainous areas. And so we provided food, clothing, generators, tent support, et cetera. So as we work through our Department of Defense mission, there is a whole of government mission that we will have to balance in that peer competition, peer conflict as well, because unfortunately hurricanes don't stop. So if one was to devastate the United States while we may be engaged in some type of conflict, we will balance both to provide that support. So again, thank you for the opportunity. A little bit of an overview. For those out in the television land, if you will, it's probably best to equate to me as a COO, so a Chief Operating Officer of a company as we go forward, but with a military mission.
So from both of those organizational overviews, what I'm pulling away is that you work together and with partners across the Department of Defense and the government to make sure that everything that is typically taken for granted is actually there when it's needed. So supply chains, weapon system maintenance, transportation to the fight, transportation from the fight, weapon systems readiness, basing, pre-positioning. Is that accurate? Am I capturing everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave was 100% correct that we are really close partners in the journey towards warfighting readiness. I mean, no single organization can do it alone, and we're fortunate to have really great partners with DLA, a really great partnership with DLA.
General Sanford, you mentioned the classes of supply.
Yes,
I'd kind of like to pick up a little bit on that, and something I heard an Army general say at the Pacific Forum, which is that logistics is really a big math problem. So can you tell us more about, all these things we take for granted and the classes of supply?
Sure. So let me, if you will, pick on the math problem piece real quick. It both simplifies things, but it's not an easy math problem. And in some cases, I would offer it's a little bit like E equals MC squared, and we may have not solved it to where we need to go. And so with that being said, there are multiple items, as I had mentioned, that we provide support to, whether it be food for that force, the uniforms for that force, the replacement items. There's a lot of focus on the repair parts and the fuel itself to make sure those weapon systems can be active. But as you talk about that math problem, it requires close integration with the services and the combatant commands. So the combatant commands own the mission, but the services provide the forces. And so that's where the math problem comes in. We know what forces will go forward to an operation. And then so how do you start doing those, or not how, but you start doing those calculations on, okay, I have this many mouths to feed. I'm going to operate these weapon systems. I'm going to operate them at this level of intensity. And so we use a lot of modeling. And I would offer it was probably in its analog state up until about a year ago, to where we, in some of its spreadsheet management, to determine what is the consumption. So once you know the consumption, now we can start to work with either industry or the department, if it requires resources, to be able to either to best position the joint force to be effective as we go forward. The modeling is what is important, and actually agreeing upon the models, because it's one thing to have a math equation, but everybody has to agree on the math equation. And so we've done some recent work in April of this year to where we brought all the services together, 3 primary combatant commands of the primary areas of responsibility, and we really dissected the math equations to make sure that we all agreed on what the consumption rate should be. So now that we have that baseline, we can get to more, how do I solve the equation, but also how do I identify the risk if I can't solve some of this? And what does that do to the combatant command who has to execute?
You know, I would offer, you know, you often hear, you know, professionals talk about the art and science of logistics. And so, you know, the science of it is a math problem, if you will. I mean, at the end of the day, you know how many rounds you're going to need to put on a target, how many mouths you're going to have to feed. But it's much more complicated than that, as Dave was alluding to, because it's an equation where you must get the right answer, and all the variables will change without your knowledge. And not only will they change without your knowledge, your adversary will be deliberately attempting to change those variables to prevent you from getting the right answer. And a logistician's responsibility is to always get the right answer, because the right answer equals, you know, as we'll talk about, readiness, which enables you to fight and win.
And if I can, Dr. Cook.
Oh, please do. We want to have a conversation here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But Cynthia, please.
Yeah, thank you. So as we talk about readiness, though, I do think it's important that maybe highlighting the beginning, at least from a DLA perspective, and I think the department recognizes this, there's being able to generate the force, and there's being able to sustain the force. So the math equation we just talked about is, how do I sustain that force in a protracted conflict for a duration, under threat, as Mr. Kelleher laid out.
Yeah, and that's where you get to the art of it, you know, where, you know, cumulative experience of logisticians gives you, you know, how you balance out the science of the equation with, you know, the art of the war fight.
And I think it goes back to something you had said, though, as far as maybe sometimes those logistics actions are glossed over because we focus on being able to generate the force. Can the tank move when I need it to? Can the airplane take off when I need it to? That's one thing. But as we've learned, and I will talk later from a Ukraine fight, the days probably of a short, sharp conflict may be behind us. And so as a logistician, as Mr. Kelleher said, that some more of the science and the art is, how do I make sure that we're able to keep that force in a fight for as long as they need to be in the fight?
Well, I remember some old research where if we're thinking about a vehicle, we have to make sure the fuel is available. So we need tankers for the fuels, and we need drivers for the tankers, and we need security forces to protect the tankers, and we need food and clothing and a variety of other equipment for all of them. So it is a big math problem. I'd like to pick up on what you said more about Ukraine and really move us into a warfighting discussion. So since Russia's initial and illegal attack on Ukraine, we've seen a lot of emphasis on discussions of the industrial base. I think it was a surprise to many about the challenges that the industrial base has, and its underfunding over the years that have led the surge to be a challenge. One of the Secretary of Defense's priorities is working to reestablish deterrence. Can you tell us about the role that readiness plays in this priority and what challenges you see in the readiness domain? How have they revealed themselves over time? Unlike the larger the industrial base, we don't have a fight that is revealing the challenges in the readiness domain into the same clarity. So how do we see those challenges, try to fix them, and really help ensure that we're reestablishing deterrence?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and you know, something that we talk about every day. I mean, we don't need to be an active participant in a warfight right now to understand that we have readiness challenges. So those readiness challenges exist, which is why the Secretary has prioritized rebuilding the military. Now, what I will tell you, I think what the lesson from Ukraine, if you will, is the importance of incorporating logistics into your campaign plan. The Russians did not. They reached a culminating point based on logistics, and they did not build a sufficient logistics base, back to their organic infrastructure in order to maintain the initial momentum that they established. And so when we take that back and look at where we are in the Department of Defense, we have an organic industrial base. We acknowledge that we have readiness challenges, and in this context, I mean weapons systems mission capable rates are not sufficient or not where we want them to be. And so one of the integral components to rebuilding readiness and reestablishing deterrence is investing additional investment in our ability across the organic industrial base and the defense industrial base writ large to be more aggressive about the components of supply and maintenance that get you to readiness. And by the components, I mean, and Dave alluded to this earlier, I mean, weapon system readiness is the equation of supply, your parts availability, plus your maintenance capability, which is really composed of two facets. That's the tools, test kits, and diagnostic equipment, and the personnel. So the three of those things, when put together, give you a readiness output. And so depending on what you want your readiness output to be, you can change the inputs. One of those key inputs being what Dave and DLA provide is the supply. And so at the end of the day, readiness is foundational to deterrence, and I think we'll talk more about that. But I'll leave it there for now. But it has highlighted the imperative. I mean, and by it I mean the Russia-Ukraine war has highlighted the imperative for near-term focus on logistics capabilities. And I'll leave it at that for now.
I'm in violent agreement.
Yep.
And before I turn the mic over, I kind of want to pick up on one thing you said about mission capable rates and the equation that goes into them. One of the challenges that I think that the readiness enterprise faces is the difficulty of communicating what readiness means. Like, what is a 50% readiness rate? We know in the industrial base, we have 1,000 munitions rolling off a line a month. That is a clear metric. We can go to the warehouse, see the munitions, we see the output. It's really sort of tractable for people.
Right.
How do we understand readiness and communicate that in the same way so that the challenge of underinvestment can be better revealed?
I think that is sort of certainly foundational. And when you look across the spectrum of how the department thinks about readiness and how the department discusses readiness and how the department measures readiness, we don't do it the same way across the spectrum of organizations. And so that's one of the things that we are working on with a readiness campaign plan that we have initiated to be more deliberate about how we, the department, are integrating the different facets of readiness across the department to normalize how the terms we are using and how we are speaking about readiness. So on the one hand, how do we measure readiness? The chairman and the Joint Chiefs measures readiness they assess readiness through directed readiness tables and DIRs, which equates to a mission capability rate that tells the chairman he has this number of units ready to deploy, for global force management. On the other side of the equation, on the sustainment side, we talk more about operational availability. Operational availability being more of a readiness metric over time, as opposed to mission capable rates, which is more of a snapshot in time. And so we need to close the gap between how the understanding of operational availability and mission capable rates through directed readiness tables, so that we have a better vernacular about how we are communicating. And I would say that how do we determine what the readiness rate should be is a function of the O plans in which we are going to employ various weapon systems. So at the end of the day, O Plan X says we need this number of F-16 squadrons to fly this many sorties. The Air Force determines we need a readiness rate that equals that. We take that back and we order a certain number of parts, and then we got to. But part of what we don't necessarily assess fully enough, I think, is organizational and intermediate level maintenance capabilities. Personnel, funding, and equipment. So I think that's another component that we need to think more about. And so I think that's a long answer, and I know Dave probably wants to jump in.
Just real
Yeah.
quick, I mean, because obviously, all great points, and so to maybe elucidate another piece is just, because Cynthia, it goes back to when I say generate the force and sustain the force. So when we look at our reporting up to the chairman or the joint chiefs or even the services, that's very much focused on, is my unit ready now? The piece that I offer as a logistician that we're starting to focus more on is, okay, but how long is my readiness provided? And that gets into some industrial-based discussions that hopefully we can have later, because at some point, that generate the force, you expire on the capability that you have. And so whatever that day is, day 31, day 46, day 65, and then you're going to be looking toward the industrial base or so forth to be able to provide that support. And so I think that's where there needs to be a little bit more emphasis on the logistics side, because as you had mentioned, logistics encompasses a lot, but it includes that industrial base as well. And if I can, I'm sorry,
Please,
just real quick, the last piece that I thought was important is when we first started talking there is what I think has changed on the readiness piece is the math equation has changed. And it requires new variables. And really to highlight what I just talked about. So before, it was a very straight equation. I'm going to fly this many hours. I need this many. I'm sorry, picking on the Air Force, but I'm going to fly this.
Very easy to pick on.
I'm going to fly that, but always in demand. But I will, we're going to fly this many hours, and which equates to so much fuel, so many parts, et cetera, that I need. But it may not be as accurate as we hope in that pure conflict. And it also is for that hour. It's not necessarily for the next 5 hours, the next 100 hours. And so that's the piece that we're working with the services on to better understand and then be able to identify the risks to the department if it requires additional resources. And then the last piece I would just offer on the Ukraine piece, because this is something that we've studied quite a bit now that we're 3 years into to that fight. On 22 February, when the Russians crossed the line, it was very clear within the first few days that they weren't prepared for opposition, and they weren't prepared necessarily for a long fight. So I would offer that one of the lessons learned from that we took away was, how do you better sync up the operational intel with the logistics planning?
Okay.
Because they were not in sync. Operations was telling them, nope, this will be over in a couple of weeks. I don't need all those trucks of ammo or forward deployed munition sites. I need you to follow the plan, and then the Ukrainians will collapse. Well, the Ukrainians got a vote. And then so that drove, I think, some disconnects between the two, which we're trying to close with better demand planning.
Any other successes or failures, lessons learned from Ukraine? And how does that differ from support for the conflict in Israel, in Gaza, and Operation Midnight Hammer in Iran? Like, what are there's enough happening right now
there's
that
an
we
awful
should
lot
have some
happening.
learning.
I just wanted to pull the thread a little bit more on what Dave said and generate and sustain. Really, two sides to the deterrence coin, and where logistics can play a role in deterrence. And I think that's an underappreciated aspect of deterrence. Generally when we think about deterrence, we think about our ability to destroy, kinetic effects on a target. And that is predicated on our ability to generate the force. We got to deliver the first punch. And the investments that we have made in the department over, say, the last 25 years have really focused on our ability to generate and deliver the first punch, deliver kinetic strikes, deter through fear of our ability to destroy. But equally, if not more important now, when we look at the conflicts that are ongoing, is our ability to endure. So we have to be able to generate, and then we have to be able to sustain over time. And our ability to endure through logistics by generating and maintaining readiness is as much a deterrent effect, or has or should have as much a deterrent effect on an adversary as anything else. And I think it's an area that we have underinvested in. We've accrued quite a bit of logistics debt over the years. And so when you fast forward that thought forward and you look at the Indo-PACOM theater, where we're going to, A potential adversary is operating with interior lines. They don't have to go very far to do what they want to do. We'll be operating with exterior lines, meaning the logistics challenges that we will face are significantly more complex. So then you go back to the math formula at the beginning. Math formula inputs and outputs with unknown changes to the variables, compounded by the distances that we have to move and the known deficiencies in our logistic capabilities that we have today that require investment in order to enhance our ability to endure, which then contributes to the deterrent effect of logistics.
Yeah, I would equate it, man, to maybe a tough street in a big city, maybe on a Saturday night. And what I mean by that is, if the police, if it's an especially maybe tough area, the police patrol may come through once an hour, well, not even once an hour, once a day, maybe twice a day. And so that doesn't necessarily deter your adversary because they know when they can act when the patrol is not there. But if you have a deterring factor to where you're able to, or an enduring factor to where you can actually have the patrol stay on the corner, well, then the person may decide not to do something in a nefarious way. And what we've got to get to is not necessarily the stationing of large number of forces, maybe back to like the 80s when we had just 300,000 Army personnel in Germany to defend the Fulda Gap. But change the equation enough with a Pacific adversary to know that I can put large forces on station quick, and I will stay in the fight as long as you want to achieve my objectives over your objectives.
Well, I think whatever the future brings, thinking of those most stressing scenarios for planning is a very useful exercise.
If I could circle back to your question, though, Cynthia, so when you compare, we'll say the Israel-Iran crisis and Ukraine. So what I would offer in Ukraine, there was a certain amount of time that the Russians telegraphed both their preparations, many months. And so there was action. So my point being is they spent a lot of time getting into position before they crossed the line. Yeah. So you had time to both either prepare your logistics or to affect your logistics. On the Iran-Israel crisis, I call it a running start. So the actions happened, and then the U.S. was in a response mode to provide the support or if asked, and provide that once asked. And so there's a little bit of a difference there. It was a smaller scale too, and so your capacity to support was not as stressed. Whereas if you have several 100,000 Russian soldiers that are going to cross the border, but yet you have 4 months maybe to act, you can position yourself in a little bit better to sustain them, which may actually drive deterrence so they don't cross the border.
So in terms of lessons for future war and an Indo-Pacific scenario, we supported Ukraine in its valiant self-defense. We were able to fly things in. We had land bridges through Poland and other local allies to support Israel. We sent over transport aircraft for Operation Midnight Hammer. I don't know every single detail, but I know that there was some aircraft deployed in advance of that kind of scenario as well, or event as well. So these seem to be cases where we've had freedom of movement. So how do we take lessons for a more stressing scenario from those? I mean, what I learned is, we can support if we can, drive over the border and deliver some munitions, but that's not going to happen in a more stressing scenario.
You're exactly right. If you can drive over the border, or as Dave mentioned, and I'll flip it, or you have the luxury of time. I think that our adversary, one of the domains that we must master is time. In our past conflicts, we have had the ability to take months to build up forces in a particular area and signal very clearly what our intention was going to be or was. We're not going to have that luxury. And we're not going to have the luxury. We will be challenged to, in the time we have available, to move the things to where they need to be by the time they need to be there. And so I think what you learn from these most recent conflicts is time. And the value of forward positioning assets and resources in a way that we used to do, arguably, in the Cold War, and have moved away from. But forward posturing, I think, is a way to mitigate the challenge of time and validates the things that we have learned from most recent conflicts. And so that posture, forward posture itself, will enable us to, I mean, in and of itself, it provides a deterrent effect, but will provide us the resources in the places we need them, when we need them there, because we arguably won't be able to get them there once we have the indication and warning that we need them. So they're going to have to be there first. And DLA is, I mean, doing just phenomenal work on developing a plan for forward posturing. And, you know, and I mean, because to me, you know, this will be about posture. And posture equals readiness, which then gives you either two things, deterrence or ability to maneuver. And maneuver maintained by readiness through posture is how you fight and win.
So what I would add, Cynthia, and I'll admit, I'll probably guard my comments a little bit.
Okay.
Only because I don't want to share with folks who may watch on how we will be
We always get a lot of views from around the world.
how we will be very effective, and they should take notice. And so what I would offer is those missile rings, regardless of whoever the adversary is, are not a force field. And so there's a lot of, so that we worry about the theory of distance. They should worry about the theory of distance also.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of space available to be able to maneuver.
A lot of maneuver space.
And so to your question, one of the things we learned, our plan is to have that material where it needs to be to exploit that maneuver space. And so I think we will be very effective on the logistics side.
Well, for a notional stressing scenario, we could think about the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
The last several presidential administrations, and this one, have identified China as an increasing strategic threat, along with concerns about the so-called Davidson window, which is the potential for an attack on Taiwan in 2027 as a mark of the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. We note that China is engaging in economic warfare, the withholding of critical minerals, for example, and also a growth in their defense industrial base, which some have assessed to be on a wartime footing. For an Indo-Pacific scenario, we will be facing the tyranny of distance, and you did mention pre-positioning, but what are the biggest concerns about a potential conflict there, and how is there anything you're doing in specific that you can share that that can help overcome these challenges?
I think it really comes down to where we started, readiness and capacity, and we are doing the things that we need to do to build the readiness and the capacity, that we would need by any given date that you would point to on the calendar. But there's a renewed focus on the industrial base. That renewed focus on the industrial base, it's the defense industrial base. I like to remind people has two components: the commercial industrial base and the organic industrial base. And so, from a legacy platform perspective, the attention that we are now putting on legacy platforms to and through and including the organic industrial base is making a difference. I mean, the secretary is laser focused on rebuilding the military and reestablishing deterrence, and I think those are the things that underlie the initiatives that we are working on that are moving the needle in a positive direction.
So what I would add to that is I don't worry as much about the tyranny of distance, and the reason being is because it tends to deter people from wanting to solve the equation.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think it's an equation that we will solve. And Mr. Kelleher alluded to this, and so we have an initiative that is ongoing that actually looks at each class of supply, all that we mentioned, because it's more than just the repair parts. You got to have everything working together, if you will, in a ballet to make sure that the force can do what it needs to do. And so some of it maybe require resourcing, some of it does not. Some of it just needs better analytics, which we are have invested in and are actually using with both artificial intelligence and machine learning to make sure we know what the prioritized requirement is, because you don't necessarily need everything. You need the right things. And logisticians haven't always had that ability to be able to really drill down to make sure we had the right things. So we had everything. And that's why you'll always hear the mountains of material.
Yeah.
Don't need mountains of material, probably need a couple of hills. And so we're using those analytics to really, we've identified what we think those hills are. And now we're working through to make sure that they're both positioned and postured to where they need to be. Also using AI and ML to make sure they're going to optimize the locations to be able to provide the agility that the combatant commander needs to work within those, that tyranny of space.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on the AI, ML, and other new technologies in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about what are approaches that have been proven effective over time. And I just want to, start off with allies and partners. The United States never fights alone. We have a lot of good work underway with allies and partners. And I'm going to start working in some questions from the audience as well here. So, we have the regional sustainment framework. Yep. We have the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience. What role can allies and partners play both in the Indo-Pacific region? And Audrey Aldisert from CSIS asks about NATO defense logistics planning, because the Indo-Pacific region is not the only region we're focused on.
Yeah, if I could go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a great question, and one that we're both passionate about and one we put a lot of energy on. And so from a DLA, Defense Logistics Agency standpoint, we're very much a global view. And so because we expect, if there is a conflict, we expect it to have global impacts. And so we may have to move material around to be able to address whatever the requirement is at the time. And so, or we'll have the requirement in place so we can deter other potential adversaries and we can keep it local. And so when we take that view, we're very much integrating more so now with the NISPA folks in NATO, as well as our European Command, which may have individual industry connections, and the Indo-Pacific. So Honorable Lohman, Chris Lohman, who's retired not too long ago, really is the one who birthed the regional sustainment framework. And so it's a great initiative that's focused on maintenance, repair, and overhaul capacity and capability in the theater, integrates with our allies. Our allies are very much using a lot of the same equipment, kit, if you will, that the United States does, which makes us a much more potent force as we go forward, because we can utilize and standardize more of our supply chains and have an individual actions and a whole bunch of different things like we've seen in Ukraine, where they've kind of cobbled together a bunch of equipment to be effective. And so besides the MRO piece, what we're trying to do is expand that to get at the components. So it's one thing to overhaul an airplane, ship, or tank, whatever. We want to, if there's countries out there, and we've got some good connections that we're expanding upon, who are willing to make the pieces, if you will, that go into the weapon system, especially if there's a U.S. industrial piece that's maybe fallen short, we're happy to expand upon that and buy from those folks so that we can have high readiness rates for us, but high readiness rates for them, which also then leads to deterrence.
Well, let me make an observation, and then I'll turn the mic over to you. I just got back from a 2-week trip in Korea and Japan, looking at shipbuilding cooperation. And one of the topics that leaders and industry in both nations talked about was a hope to do more ship maintenance in their nations. But they also identified a number of challenges, different standards, different approaches to ongoing maintenance issues, different industrial approaches. So what kind of opportunities do you see there, and what kind of challenges do you see?
Well, I mean, first let me start. I mean, the United States Navy has been pulling ships into every port in the world and getting them repaired for hundreds of years. And so this is not something, yes.
It is not new.
Yes, there are things that we need to work on and refine and improve, 100%. And I think the context of the regional sustainment framework, it provides a nice framing mechanism for thinking about how we need to conduct maintenance, repair, overhaul forward. Because everything you can do forward is something you don't have to bring back to CONUS to repair. Now, but I think there's an answer to your initial question. That capability will not succeed, and we will not succeed we will not be able to fight and win without, tied at the hip with partners and allies. They are going to be integral to our ability to support and maintain our forces and fight and win. And so that is foundational. But when you think about, regional sustainment and including NATO and the NATO Support and Procurement Agency, it's really sort of a mesh network. I think about regional sustainment as a mesh network that is a combination of capabilities. So it's partner and ally organic military capability. They fly F-16s, we fly F-16s. They can fix our F-16s. There's also partner and ally commercial capabilities. They have commercial entities that fix their F-16 parts, and I know I'm probably not F-16 parts, but
actually in both theaters.
So we should be able to use those. We should know globally every commercial provider that we have a contract with, and that is knowable, and those are things that we're working on. So that when you pull into a port or when you land somewhere, you know who to contract with. Our commercial partners are going to be integral as well. Companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin have a global infrastructure of maintenance, repair, and overhaul. We should be partnering with them to understand what those capabilities are, where they are, and how we can capitalize on them. And that is part of the framework. The other thing that is part of the framework is our departmental deployable, I won't call it depot maintenance, but heavy maintenance capability. So beyond that which, a unit can do on its own, we can deploy, and each service has varying degrees of capability of heavy maintenance to deploy forward, to fix ships, in a port, to fix aircraft, to fix, a tank. And so we need to, one of the things that we are working on is better understanding what those capabilities are across the department, understanding where the deficiencies are, and then sharing that information so that each service has a better understanding of what deployable maintenance capabilities their fellow services have. When the Air Force deploys, their deployable capability called Readiness, they can fix Marine Corps F-18s as much as they can fix F-35s. And so I think there's a commonality there that we can continue to flesh out as we develop the network. The last thing I'll mention with the network, really global, is the National Guard program, where they've been their partnership program, where for decades National Guard units have been partnering and have personal relationships with military units around the world.
State partnerships.
Yeah, the state partnership program. So that's another aspect of regional sustainment that I think we will continue to incorporate. But you're right. It is, as you said at the outset, it is foundational, our ability to incorporate partner and ally capability.
Okay. I'm sorry,
please.
Cynthia. The only last piece to maybe just put another fine point on it is what we're trying to do is build, if you will, that military global supply chain, and not just a supply chain necessarily based within the U.S. And so primarily rely on the one in the U.S., but be able to leverage the one that is overseas as well. And then, as Mr. Kelleher mentioned, we get after some of the foreign military sales issues that the Secretary is also trying to reform, so that we can be more effective for our allies, and they can have the same readiness that we need them to have, which then is just the most powerful deterrent.
Well, I understand the importance of the processes in the FMS program, and also the role of ITAR ensuring that technologies don't fall into adversary hands. But our allies and partners do have alternatives, so if there's undue delays working with us,
Absolutely.
they can go elsewhere.
Right.
So I think reform is definitely called for.
Yes.
I want to pick up on what you said about the Global Enterprise Network for Universal Sustainment, or GENIS. General Hawkins gave opening remarks at a recent event, and I know he is leading the way on that. Do you have anything you'd like to add for that? I see you are wearing an Air Force uniform.
Familiar with it. So we we're partnering with the Air Force Sustainment Center, which is the organization that General Hawkins commands, to try to advance the MRO capacity and capability he's trying to push forward. So in the Air Force, he runs we call them air logistics complexes. They're just our repair depots. But they're all centered in the CONUS with small exceptions overseas. And so looking to expand that capacity or have a wartime deployable capacity forward. So it's really a brilliant initiative. We're partnering with the Air Force on that to get after what I had mentioned before is, okay, beyond just the repair piece, Japan, you mentioned, they have a lot of capacity, or I shouldn't say capacity, a lot of capability with other companies that make aviation assets, since Genus is going to be aviation focused. And so how do we use them to also make the boxes that overhaul those airplanes? So I think that's where there's the next evolution, if you will, as we go forward. But we're very much nested with them. And just like it's been ships have sailed into ports and gotten repaired since we just had wooden hull ships, the Air Force has been using commercial entities overseas to overhaul aircraft for decades, so they don't have to leave the theater.
Since airplanes were controlled by strings and made out of paper and balsa wood.
Korean Airlines, you think about CAL as a passenger carrier. They have amazing capacity to actually support F-16s so that they never leave the peninsula. And we're doing something similar, which also falls under Genus, moving into Europe.
So I take your point, and here we are in a public event talking about the opportunities. But when I talk to partner industry and partner governments, they also highlight the challenges. We did some research on looking at whether Japanese industry could support aircraft repair. We are looking at ship maintenance. I've looked at work with Australia. We've done a lot of work with partners and allies. And the challenge is that they see the partnership frameworks, Piper and RSF and DICAS and AUKUS. And really the question is always of implementation and unpacking those little tiny specific challenges that get in the way of making things happen. So different standards, a partner may say, well, we use commercial standards and, that are accepted globally around the world, but the Department of Defense, insists on their specific Department of Defense standards. So that's an issue. We've had partner industry say, hey, we're happy to support U.S. systems. We're going to have to grow our capacity, and who is going to pay for that investment of infrastructure? So how are you working to identify what investments will be needed in advance of the fight and working on them now? Because we don't want to be working these issues out, while we're in a conflict.
Right. Well, I think across the department, there are multiple initiatives. As Dave just said, Genus being one of them, where we're, very deliberately identifying requirements and the resources associated. And from a regional perspective, the good thing is that, with all of these initiatives, we are moving that dialogue forward because you're right, there is, we think about problems differently. Certainly the Department of Defense tends to overclassify information, which then we won't even share with our partners who we say are our partners. And, those are things that's a known problem But I think we're making good progress on those things, and every day that goes by, is another opportunity to highlight an opportunity for better understanding about the differences in things like standards, so that we can work through and better understand the risk associated. And sometimes there's no risk, sometimes there's significant risk, and so each of those details are going to take some time to work through. But the good thing is that we're doing it. And in terms of investment, I think we are being very aggressive in the department right now about looking across the organic industrial base, identifying deficiencies. The services have been doing great things and really focusing on, what is the investment required for readiness? How can we reinvigorate the organic industrial base in partnership with the commercial industrial base, with a specific focus on a couple of things that my office is working on is tools, test kits, and diagnostic equipment. Oftentimes for legacy platforms, we got one thing that does the thing, and that's not going to support Genus, and it's not going to support agile combat employment. It's not going to support, forward repair. And so we are in the process of assessing across the department, where are our single point of failure
Yeah.
test kits, tools,
People.
and diagnostic equipment, to say nothing of the people.
Yes.
That that you had the one guy who does the thing and he can't be in 3 places, and oh, by the way, we can't send him to Guam,
And oh, by the way, he's ready to retire.
or maybe just retired, right? And so yes, I mean, we are actively looking at those to better understand where the shortfalls are, and then where we at the department level can be an advocate for the services.
I think that, Cynthia, it starts with forecasting to build upon that, and maybe a little bit more of a tactical level. But we're not as accurate as we need to be, and so we have a lot of room to improve. And so I don't necessarily need all the capacity for everything. And I'd mentioned that before. I need the capacity for the right things, and it could be a whole system, or it could be the components of a system to sustain that. And so we have 5 different initiatives ongoing in DLA that are to improve our forecasting and modeling. And so we'll be able to send a more accurate demand signal to industry so that they will feel confident to both invest on their own because they know the likelihood and also the consistency of the business signal that will go to them. And they can invest in the workforce as needed too. And so we're trying to get to where we can go from 30 to 60 miles an hour versus 0 to 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And then the last piece I would offer is, and we need some help with industry on this, is, and we're trying to reform the system. I mean, the Secretary is working hard to reform federal acquisition regulations, and with May 2026 as a standard to maybe publish new guidance and a new FAR. But where I'm going with that is we do right now suffer from the request for information, request for proposal process. That's how we get vendors interested, and that's how we get them to bid on things. It doesn't always have to be the same folks. It's just the folks who know and are willing to navigate that process are the ones who typically bid. I think there's a lot of untapped American industrial capacity out there. I just need them willing to come to the table, and we're working through how do we advertise more through the association so that they would be willing to, if you will, give us a shot and work through the process. And I think that's really a focus area that we need to work on.
Well, I think you just answered the question that Carl Bushman of the Council of Supply Chain Management asked, which is how do we get the whole of nation industrial base involved in this, and what role the private sector should play?
I'm sorry, if I could just add one thought to Dave. When one of the things that we think about when we talk about investment, and given the lead time for tooling and given the lead time for developing manufacturing capabilities, the department is in the process of thinking about the problem differently and investing and moving towards perhaps, or at least considering making investments in capacity we don't need today in order to have it in 18 months or 24 months when we need it. And so, yes, industry needs a consistent demand signal. But what if we, the department, perhaps leveraging private capital, made capital investments in equipment that we then paid a fee for, or whatever fee may not be the right word, a commercial entity to maintain in turnkey status, so that when we needed it, we could turn it on and use it, or maybe we could. Leverage a partnership where we build a capability and it runs 3 production lines and they get 2 and we get 1. And then we can flip it or something like that. So I think those are things that we are talking about.
So I get that.
Right.
Okay. But it gets to the enduring challenge of, if deterrence is successful, it means we've paid for things that we haven't used.
Right.
And the folks who've made those investments are then called on the carpet. Why did you make these investments in things that was wasteful? So how do we continue to communicate the necessity of these investments to ensure readiness, even if they're never used?
Yeah, so I would offer, every American taxpayer dollar is precious.
And thank you.
And we do not look at that lightly. But I think to answer your question, there's a risk assessment that's required that, in all honesty and transparency, the logistics community probably hasn't done the best job highlighting risk to mission, risk to force. And so we've, at least in DLA, in coordination with the Joint Force, we think we got a good rubric that starts to show that. And so to your point, Cynthia, it highlights if you don't make the investment, this is what maybe you may not be able to do. And so you have to understand the ramifications for that. But if you do make the investment, you have the flexibility that you want. And then if you never consume it, but that's okay because you knew you were buying operational flexibility, not just stuff to sit on a shelf.
Well, that's why we're here to,
Right.
to highlight these issues.
Well, no, and I think fundamentally it comes down to, deterrence, and logisticians being more effective in communicating the deterrent effect of logistics capabilities. Too often we just think, we need logistics to get, my stuff from point A to point B so I can put rounds on a target. Well, but if you think about it in a different paradigm, then perhaps you can get to the justification of additional funding that is not efficient, but effective in that, you don't actually have to go to war. And I think, as Dave said, it is one of the things that as logisticians, we generally haven't done a very good job communicating. And that I just think, but you're never going to be able to measure the thing that didn't happen.
The counterfactual.
Right, the counterfactual. But I think we can make a very strong case for it because, this sort of takes us back to where we started. Our ability to sustain, to endure, is as important as our ability to deliver immediate kinetic effect.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and there is one last topic I want to talk about. I know it's a
Always run
great
out of time.
conversation. So we have two questions, one from Ben, a student at Tulane University, and the other from Ryan Keano Wettermeyer of Romeo Kilo Defense Systems. And both of them are asking about new technologies. And I had a question about this too. You mentioned earlier about how you're using new technologies for better prediction. Can you talk about how you're using artificial intelligence to, make sure that you're buying hills of material and not iron mountains?
Right.
What kind of other investments are you making in, additive manufacturing and other advanced manufacturing? What does the future look like for logistics and readiness and all of these enterprise
Well, I think
issues?
in terms of technology adoption, we're moving forward, in a positive way in a couple different pathways. We've got a program, the Rapid Sustainment Implementation Program, that is congressionally supported. That gives us funding to, buy commercial off-the-shelf stuff that works now and deliver it right to a program office so that they can take it for a test drive, and if it's something that they like, so it's seed funding in that perspective. Advanced manufacturing has gained, I would say that it is institutionalized in the Department of Defense. Are there more things we need to do to continue to expand it? Absolutely. But at the departmental level, we've got a great partnership between our colleagues at Research and Engineering, Industrial-Based Policy, DLA. We sort of have this this triumvirate, if you will, where we are advancing advanced manufacturing in parallel across the department. We're looking at some policy changes that we can use to accelerate. And so I think we're making good progress there. And then in terms of artificial intelligence, over the last couple of years, I think the department, including with DLA, has built a very solid data foundation. And now we are turning to operationalizing that data by leveraging commercial AI software. And we are in the process of doing that at my office and I think at DLA.
DLA?
So I would echo those pieces. I think to get at Ben, and I'm sorry to get the other gentleman's name, question, using artificial intelligence, first of all, it's become affordable, and then also it's allowed us to ingest data that we couldn't do before. So in the past, as a supply chain organization, well, you're very much focused on supply consumption. And so we were probably missing out, we were missing out on the maintenance requirements, mean time between failures, or mean time between changes, all of those things that actually drive a more predictive and, if you will, accurate forecast. And so we're now working, we've partnered with three of the services, so the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force right now, to ingest that data and start to calculate what we think the forecast goes. And that should help us get to the 85% number that we're looking to try to get to. And then if we go higher, that's great. But that's one piece on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then we're also leveraging it fairly significantly in DLA to let it do what I would call some of the mundane tasks, if you will, through bots or other pieces behind the scenes, collection of data, movement of data, but also to help breed confidence in some of our automated ordering so that we can actually just set up more automated ordering versus manual contracts, which are slow and cumbersome and are not as effective as we need them to be. So I would offer that. And then on the advanced manufacturing, as Pat mentioned, we're very much engaged with the services. I'll admit we don't manufacture pieces. We work to collect the data, if you will, the IP to build the packages so they can be used across the joint force. But to the question, where we're starting to see the transition in the services, and I think you have to break it down into two aspects. There's the old weapon systems, if you will, that you got to sustain. It's a little more challenging to use advanced manufactured parts on them because it requires quite a bit of engineering analysis that we just don't always have the capacity for. And then there's the newer weapon systems, which which we've had talks with the program element offices about. How do you go ahead and just design in the requirement that I want 30% of the item to be advanced manufactured? So it's built into the platform. And so maybe you pay a little bit more up front, but your long-term sustainment costs are considerably less.
So really looking to the future.
That's
All right,
right.
we are over time, so lightning round.
Lightning round.
Lightning
All right.
round. I am old enough to remember the days when people talked about cutting the tail to save the tooth. And I've always thought that misses the point, that really the tail is the part of the tooth. So what do you have to say to inspire Snuffy Airman or Sally Marine or somebody in the Army starting their career and thinking about joining this enterprise? Well, what are your notes of inspiration to junior warfighters?
I think, from my perspective, it is all about fighting and winning. And we have to do absolutely everything we can to empower the Department of Defense and the services to fight and win against whomever we need to fight. And when you talk about tooth to tail, I wouldn't say it's a ratio, I'd say it's a balance. And we're going to make sure that we have the right balance so that the tooth can inflict the necessary amount of damage on any adversary.
Yeah, so what I would offer, and I have this conversation with junior officers quite a bit, is it's probably the best time in my 30 years of being a logistician to be a logistician. And so the senior leaders who make the decisions on both either how we're going to warfight and the kit we're going to have recognize the importance of logistics more so than I've ever seen. And under more than just recognizing, they're actually putting in resources behind what is needed because they recognize that if we go to a major conflict tomorrow, this isn't the 1943 to where I'm going to churn out 1,100 B-17s in a month. We'll have a certain amount of capability that can come off a line, but you've got to really be effective at sustaining what you got to be effective. And so I would offer now is the greatest time, or I shouldn't say the greatest time, it's one of the best times to be a logistician, but we need you to think more broadly. It's not just generating the force or being really focused on the battalion or the squadron that you're assigned to. It's thinking through what do I need to be able to stay in the fight more than just the supplies that I carry on my back.
All right. Well, Mr. Patrick Kelleher, General David Sanford, and all of our viewers, including Mary Jo Kelleher and Jane Kelleher.
My mom and aunt, thank you. Hopefully they were
And
able to
also,
join. Yeah.
all the folks that have sent in questions. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but we will share the list with the leaders after this event. Thank you very much for joining us today.
And thank you for
Thank
having
you for
us.
the opportunity.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.